Well, hey everybody, Don here again. It is Sunday, May 13th. I guess it's Mother's Day, actually. Shed hunting season is over for me. Finished that up last weekend, actually the Friday before last. Found a couple, so that took me up to 14 for the year, which was a new record for me, which I was happy with. I'm going to take you on a little shed tour today and show you some of the better ones that I've got hanging up here in the office and out in the living room and some of the other places where they hang out. Really wanted to find some more sheds this year, so I've got a couple of furniture ideas that I want to do with some natural tree trunk parts and some shed antlers. So getting close to where I want to be to start working on some furniture pieces. But for now, I'm just going to take you around, show you some sheds, tell you the tales of a few of them, and hope you enjoy it. So kind of start off in my office. This is where I spend a lot of time. There's a few nice sheds up there I'll tell you about. The clutter in here is amazing. Oh, there's the pig. There's a little window dressing up there. I'll pull a couple of those down, especially that one right in the middle. That's a pretty massive shed. We'll talk about that. And we'll definitely talk about that one. That's my favorite shed. So we'll head out into the living room and I'll show you a little bit more. All right. Walking out of the office into the living room area. There's a pretty good collection of sheds right there. Nothing huge, but I don't know, I'd say there's 28, 29, maybe 30 sheds there. No matched sets, but... And then there's, let's see, that's my New Brunswick buck from, I think, maybe 2010 or 12. And right there's my Missouri buck from year before last. So that was 2016. I got a couple of nice sheds up there, a couple up here, and then we'll go down and see there's some moose sheds. I'll talk about those in a minute. Like I said, there's some moose sheds, and then we'll go up here some of the bucks that I've shot over the years. You can see there's nothing big there. Like I said, the pig was by far my biggest, but this set of sheds right here, if you watched my Easter weekend shed hunting bonanza, I talked about that set there. I found that about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. And that was the first matched set of sheds that I'd ever found. They were on either side of a bed still, in the snow. And actually there was a little blood on the bases, so that was really a fresh set. There's a couple of small sheds in there, but back over to this set here, that was the second set of matched sheds that I ever found. I talked about that in that video as well. That was the same day that I found that other set, and that set was on either side of a trail, just 3 feet apart. So, yeah, that's a nice set. Well, I told you I'd tell you a little bit about some of these moose sheds, so I'll just touch base on a couple of them. This one here, probably one of my biggest moose sheds, and this is actually the very first shed antler I ever found. And you can see it's a nice big moose shed. Story behind this is kind of funny. I was 1978, I think it was, and I was in the military. I was stationed up in northern Maine, and I was out grouse hunting. And at some point, nature called, and I took a squat. Tore off part of my t-shirt because I didn't have anything with me, and took care of business, and then went about hunting and went back to the base. Well, when I got back to the base, reached for my wallet to get my ID. No wallet. Knew right where it was, so back I went about 25 miles off base, and I'm walking, following my tracks, got right to the spot where I knew I had taken care of business, and found my wallet, turned around, looked, and this thing had been laying 20 feet behind me. and I never saw it. So that was a pretty fortunate turn of events. But yeah, that's kind of funny. This one is kind of cool. I was muzzleloader hunting here in New Hampshire quite a few years ago, and I was coming down a skidder trail, and I saw a big bear, and he was facing away from me, and he was feeding on something, I thought, and I was trying to figure out how I could get an angle. You know, he was a pretty good sized bear, and with a muzzleloader, he only got one shot, so I wanted to make sure I had the best possible shot. He winded me, and he took off running. I never did get the shot. I went down to where he was sitting, and I found this. This is part of a moose antler, and it was chewed off rough. You can see it's more chewed like a dog would chew it, you know, a bone instead of a rodent with a nice sharp cut. And it was actually covered with blood. And then right where that moose was sitting was this. This looks like it might have been a pretty decent antler. I mean, the beam could have been way out here, or the paddle, I mean. And you can see it's a rough chew, like a canine. So that was kind of cool. Never did see that bear again. I got a couple other smaller ones. There's nice color on this one. I'm saving this one for a piece of furniture because it's got no antler marks on it. No teeth marks on it. And this one here, I'm also going to use for a piece of furniture. It's got that weird 90 degree bend. It's small enough that I'll be able to use that in conjunction with some of these yellow birch roots that I'm trying to make some furniture out of. That's kind of cool. And then I'll probably knock all these things down. But another nice one found here in New Hampshire. All these, except for this one, which was in Maine, all the rest of these are New Hampshire. So nothing huge, but you know, always a blast to find a moose antler when you're out in the woods. So that's it. There's a few others, nothing special about them. These look like they're pretty close to being a match set, but I don't believe they are. I do have one match set upstairs, and I'll show you that. Upstairs and take a look at that match set. Say, Tucker, you hungry, bud? What? Hungry? Oh yeah, I'm hungry. So here you go. Here's that nice match set that I was telling you about. This set was found not too far from here. This was my hunting partner, Franny, and I were out looking for these sheds. Franny was nice enough to give it to me, so that's pretty special. But it's nice set. Did you say you were hungry? I thought you were. All right, well, the first antler I want to show you is this one right here. This was a buck. I found this antler, about 10 years ago, and this was the first antler from this buck that was found. Actually found this one in a stream. The tip of the main beam had been chewed by some rodents, and the tip of the G3 had been busted off. So because it had those issues with it, I turned it into a knife. And actually, here's the knife right here. I had this knife made by the late, great Larry Benoit. I took that antler over to his shop, and he made that antler for me. Larry is probably the most famous deer tracker here in the Northeast. Definitely a legend in New England. And also a great knife maker. He made that knife for me. And that was probably 6 or 7 years before he passed. So that knife will be a treasure for me forever. So that was the first antler. Then the second antler is this lower one right here. And definitely the same buck. Actually, you know, a little bit bigger. He grew a little kicker between the G3 and the G4. But you can see the curve of that main beam and the way the tip comes up. There's no mistake in that is the same buck. I found that antler no more than 100 yards away from where I found the first one. Then this antler, the second one behind it, was found a year later in the same general area by my hunting partner Franny. That was a year later, so there was 4 years between the first one and the third one. But you can see he didn't change much at all. Very similar in size. And then this antler here, which obviously is the same buck again, was found fresh by a friend of Franny's. It was actually underneath an apple tree in his backyard. He was not an antler collector, so he gave it to Franny, and then Franny and I went over there looking for it, and we found the match to that, probably 50 yards behind the guy's house. It's actually funny because Franny and I were meeting up. We were walking from two different directions, and the shed was right between us. Actually, probably about 2 steps closer to Franny when he found it. So I mounted that for him on one of the Mountain Mike plastic skulls. Actually looks really nice. That's a beautiful buck. Never had it scored, but I'm guessing that would score, probably in the 140s. Just a gorgeous buck. So really cool to have the history on that. Have all 4 antlers from the same side plus the match, and all found within probably a quarter of a mile of each other. So very awesome. That's one deer that we had the most history on. Unfortunately, we never got a picture of that deer, and even though we hunted that area pretty hard, we never got any opportunities for that deer. So that deer's long since gone, but hopefully he passed on his genes, and there's a similar buck running around that side of the town. So I pulled this one down. This one is it's probably the most shed I have with the most mass on it. It is really a dandy shed. Unfortunately, it's got that split brow tine, but part of it was busted off. This one was found in the water. I had a chocolate lab back in the day named Cody, and he was a shed hunting machine. He's found a bunch of sheds that I have, and it was really kind of a blind retrieve because he couldn't even see that thing in the water, but he went and got it when I kept pointing to him saying, "Get that shed, get that shed." So that's a pretty cool one. That is probably, if not the highest scoring shed I have, probably the second highest scoring shed. The G2 on that is about 9 inches. The G3 is about 10 inches. It's got this really cool bladed and just a little bit of a broken, wasn't really even be a G5 because it was so small, but it was bladed out kind of like that point there on the end. Then it's also got this cool little wannabe drop tine there at the base, which was broken off. And then check out that brow tine bladed out like that. Very cool. That shed came from New York a long time ago, and that is one of my biggest for sure. I'd say that antler scores in the mid to high 60s. I think I know I scored it before. I can't remember exactly what it scores, but it's mid to high 60s. So we're looking at a 150-inch deer there. And I have one other similar to that. That is my my biggest New Hampshire antler, and that antler scores 66 5/8, I believe it is. Another 150-inch deer. He's just got everything. I mean, he's got decent mass all the way around. He's just rock solid buck. I found that 2 years ago, and I spent the rest of my shed hunting season looking for the mate. And man, I looked a long time and logged a lot of miles. I found that antler way up high. I'll post a picture behind this that shows Tucker with that shed, but that's absolutely a beauty. He's got fairly long main beam, and just everything about that buck is absolutely gorgeous. So let me take you over to my absolute favorite shed. And that is this one right here. This isn't the biggest shed in my collection, but it is the most special. and I'll tell you the story on this one. So 9 years ago, my brother-in-law Bobby was in the hospital for the last time after a 3-year battle with cancer. And we had all been in the hospital with him. I guess it was, I forget what day it was, but his kids, his wife, his parents, my wife, we had all been at the hospital. And he was pretty much out of it at that point. I had said to his son Luke that I was going to head out to my old stomping grounds and find a shed for Bobby. And so the next morning I got up early and I headed out there, and I was covering this one hill. There was a bunch of pines, and I was coming out of the pines, and I looked to my left, and there was a coyote sitting there looking at me just on the rise of a hill. He was probably no more than 20 yards away, just sitting there looking at me, and kind of caught me by surprise. A coyote out in the middle of the day. Didn't seem to be afraid of me at all. So I gave him a yell and said, "Get out of here, you crazy dog!" And he yipped at me. He did like a yip 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 yip. And I got a little bit nervous, and I looked around for something to throw at him, or a stick or something to use in case he decided to come after me. And he just sat there looking at me. So I picked up this big branch and I waved it over my head, and I go, "Go on, get out of here, you crazy dog." And he yipped at me again, and then he turned around and down over the bank of the hill that he went, and across about 80 yards of field and into some reeds at the end of a pond, cattails, reeds. The pond was still frozen. And as I had walked towards the edge of the little crest of the hill that he was on, and I'm looking down where he was at, and he turned around and he yipped at me once again, and then he walked off into the cattails and reeds and just kind of disappeared from sight. And as I stood there, I looked down at my feet, and literally 2 feet in front of me, right where that coyote had been sitting, was this shed. And I just kind of broke down and gave it a good cry, and realized that coyote had led me right to that shed. So I call this Bobby's shed, and it's probably a year old, but when I found it, but absolutely one of my favorite sheds. Well, that's it. That's pretty much the bulk of my shed collection. Not a big collection, I've been picking them up for quite a few years. I probably only have, I don't know, maybe 70 or 80 over the years. That includes chalky ones and chewed up ones that find their way to the garden, the nicer ones that decorate the house, and I've probably given a dozen away to some young people that are interested in sheds but never found one, or a couple friends wanted to make knives, so I gave them some decent sheds. But they're all pretty special to me. They're nature's little treasures when you find them out in the woods, and you put a lot of miles on trying to find them. So that's it for this year. We'll get back after it after the season next year. Got some fishing coming up. Hunting season's not very far away. Bow season's really only about 4 months away, so we got that to look forward to. So hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.